I am Chloe Dubois, a 38-year-old fashion designer, and I found myself in an unimaginable situation at my in-laws' golden anniversary. My husband's parents, the formidable patriarch and matriarch of the Dubois family, publicly demanded that I perpetually fund my sister-in-law Genevieve's struggling art career using the profits from my own luxury fashion brand. My refusal, firm yet polite, was met with my father-in-law's chilling threat regarding my husband's inheritance. In that moment, surrounded by their esteemed guests, a cold dread settled over me, and I uttered words that changed the course of my life. My support is not limitless. Before I tell you what happens next, and how finding your voice can liberate you from the unspoken contracts that bind you, make sure to like and subscribe to join me on this journey. My journey into the world of haute couture began not with a silver spoon, but with a sewing machine borrowed from my grandmother and a head full of designs. I was Chloe Dubois, a name now synonymous with timeless elegance and ethical craftsmanship, but once, just a girl from a modest background with an insatiable passion for fashion. My childhood in a small, provincial town outside Lyon was far removed from the glittering salons of Paris, but from an early age, I possessed an innate understanding of fabric, form, and the transformative power of a well-executed garment. While other children played outside, I was often found hunched over patterns, painstakingly hand-stitching scraps of material into miniature creations for my dolls, each piece a meticulous endeavor. My grandmother, a retired seamstress with nimble fingers and a kind smile, was my first mentor, patiently teaching me the fundamentals, her wisdom a gentle balm against my own youthful impatience. She saw a spark in me that no one else did, an artistic drive that went beyond mere hobby. "Chloe, ma petite," she would say, her voice soft with encouragement, "you have a gift. Never forget that. And gifts, they must be nurtured, not hidden." I poured every ounce of my being into building my luxury brand, Atelier Chloe, from the ground up. There were countless sleepless nights, sketching intricate designs under the dim glow of my desk lamp. Endless days, trawling fabric markets for the most exquisite silks and sustainably sourced organic cottons, and grueling weeks perfecting every stitch and drape of a single garment. Every thread, every button, every seam was a testament to my unwavering commitment to quality and my belief that fashion could be both beautiful and responsible. My first small studio was a cramped, unheated garret in the Marais district, where the scent of coffee and fabric dust perpetually mingled. I worked alone for the first 2 years, fueled by cheap croissants and an unyielding vision. Slowly, painstakingly, Atelier Chloe began to gain traction, first with local boutiques, then with a few discerning fashion editors who recognized the unique blend of modern sensibility and timeless craftsmanship in my collections. Securing my first major order, a collection for a prestigious department store in Tokyo, felt like a validation of every sacrifice, every doubt overcome. It was a pivotal moment, a quiet affirmation that my dream was, in fact, becoming a tangible reality. My atelier, now a sun-drenched penthouse in the heart of Paris, was more than just a workspace. It was a sanctuary, a vibrant hub of creativity, a tangible representation of every challenge overcome, every risk taken, every triumph celebrated. It hummed with the focused energy of my growing team of talented designers, pattern makers, and seamstresses. A place where dreams were meticulously woven into tangible art, transforming raw materials into garments that whispered stories of elegance and innovation. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered breathtaking views of the Parisian rooftops, a constant source of inspiration and a stark reminder of how far I had come. My brand flourished, achieving critical acclaim and a devoted clientele across the globe. Each fashion show, each glowing review, each celebrity seen in my designs was a victory, not just for Atelier Chloe, but for the girl who once dreamed of stitching magic from scraps. Yet amidst this professional ascendancy, my personal life became intricately, almost suffocatingly, entwined with the Dubois family, the venerable clan my husband, Pierre, belonged to. The Dubois family was old money, a name that carried significant weight in Parisian society, steeped in traditions, social hierarchies, and unspoken rules. Their ancestral home in the 7th arrondissement was a museum of inherited wealth, filled with antique furniture, ancestral portraits, and a pervasive scent of polished wood and unspoken expectations. Pierre was a kind, gentle soul, a stark contrast to his imposing parents, Henry and Claudette. They were the architects of what I affectionately, if sometimes ironically, called the Golden Empire. A facade of impeccable manners, impeccably tailored clothing, and meticulously curated social circles that concealed a deep-seated belief in their own inherent superiority. They operated with an almost regal air, their pronouncements delivered with an assumed authority that brooked no dissent. From the moment I married Pierre, I felt an unspoken pressure to conform, to prove myself worthy of their esteemed surname. My own self-made success, something I had earned through sheer grit and talent, seemed to perplex them more than impress. They acknowledged it with a dismissive wave, often saying, "Oh, Chloe's little business." As if Atelier Chloe, with its global reach, its flagship boutiques, and its millions in revenue, was a quaint hobby I pursued to fill my spare time. Their true adoration, their unwavering focus, their almost obsessive devotion, was reserved for Pierre's younger sister, Genevieve. Genevieve was, in their eyes, the true artist of the family, a perpetually struggling painter whose abstract works, to my admittedly less-than-art expert eye, often resembled a child's enthusiastic finger painting, devoid of structure or real depth. Despite her consistent lack of commercial success or critical recognition beyond the occasional vanity gallery show, Henry and Claudette championed her with an almost religious fervor. Her every whim, from elaborate studio rentals in trendy districts to exorbitantly priced, obscure art supplies flown in from remote corners of the globe, was indulged without question. And who, you might ask, often footed the bill for these increasingly elaborate and financially draining artistic endeavors? Yours truly. What began as polite loans for Genevieve's creative ventures, a new set of brushes, a small exhibition space, escalated rapidly into regular, increasingly substantial requests. My parents-in-law, with their usual blend of subtle emotional manipulation and overt expectation, would call, their voices laced with concern for Genevieve's genius and its underappreciated nature in the cruel art world. "Chloe, darling," Claudette would coo over the phone, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness, "Genevieve's new exhibition space needs significant renovation. Such a shame she's struggling with funds, especially with her vision for that monumental sculpture. You, with your thriving business, could so easily help her nurture her talent. It would be such a blessing for the family, a true investment in the arts." It was never a direct demand, never a harsh ultimatum, but the implication was clear. If I truly cared about family, if I truly wanted to be accepted into the inner sanctum of the Dubois, I would open my coffers. And I, yearning for that elusive acceptance, that simple nod of approval, that fleeting glimpse of genuine affection from them, almost always did. I justified it to myself, and to Pierre, as an investment in family harmony, a necessary tithe for peace. Perhaps, I thought, if I showed enough generosity, if I proved myself selfless enough, if I demonstrated my unwavering loyalty, they would finally see me as more than just an outsider, more than just Pierre's ambitious, self-made wife. I wanted to believe that one day, Henry and Claudette would look at me with the same pride and uncritical affection they reserved for Genevieve. I wanted to believe that their constant borrowing was a temporary measure, a bridge to Genevieve's inevitable artistic breakthrough. Each transfer of funds was a silent plea for connection, a desperate attempt to weave myself more deeply into the fabric of their lives, to belong. But with each financial contribution, their gratitude, if it ever truly existed, diminished, replaced by an unsettling sense of entitlement. My money became their money, my profits their personal ATM for Genevieve's endless artistic whims. The invisible thread that connected me to the Dubois family, once perceived as a bond, was slowly tightening into a noose of expectation, suffocating my independence and eroding my sense of self-worth. I was a financial resource, not a beloved family member. The email arrived like a gilded invitation to my own entrapment. A formal, embossed missive announcing Henry and Claudette's golden wedding anniversary. A celebration of 50 years of unwavering love and family legacy, the elegant script declared, promising an event of unparalleled grandeur. It listed the venue, the grand ballroom of the Hotel Ritz Paris. The date, a Saturday evening 3 months hence, and then, subtly attached, was a discreet, personal note from Claudette, slipped in like a silk-gloved dagger. "Chloe, darling," it began, for such a momentous occasion, we simply must have the finest. You understand, of course, that certain expenses fall outside our usual budget. The catering, the floral arrangements, the vintage champagne, all require a touch of magnificence. We know we can count on you to ensure everything is perfect. After all, you have such exquisite taste, and your business is thriving so splendidly. The unspoken expectation hung heavy in the air, clearer than any explicit demand. They hadn't asked if I would contribute, they had simply assumed. They hadn't invited me to participate in the planning, they had dictated my role as their financier. They expected me to foot the bill for their entire extravagant affair, a sum I later calculated to be well over €250,000 for a single night of opulent celebration and social maneuvering. It was a sum that, while significant, wouldn't cripple Atelier Chloe, but the audacity, the sheer entitlement, the casual assumption of my perpetual wealth made my blood run cold. They hadn't asked, they had simply taken for granted. For a fleeting moment, a defiant no formed on my lips. I imagined the relief, the sheer, intoxicating liberation of refusing to participate in their charade, of finally saying, enough. But then, the familiar internal tug-of-war began. Pierre, bless his gentle heart, would be devastated if his parents' grand celebration, this monument to their enduring love, fell short. He'd be caught in the middle, torn between his parents and his wife, and the thought of causing him distress was unbearable. And what would the Parisian elite say? The Dubois family's reputation was paramount, a carefully constructed edifice of social grace and old-world charm, and any perceived stumble, any hint of financial strain, would be a scandal, a stain that would ripple through their carefully curated social circles for years. So I sighed, clicked reply, and discreetly arranged for the transfer of funds, ensuring every detail, from the Michelin-starred catering to the bespoke floral arrangements flown in from Holland, was impeccable. I swallowed my pride, telling myself it was for Pierre, for the illusion of family harmony. I rationalized it as a final, grand gesture, hoping it would finally satiate their insatiable appetite for my resources. I just wanted them to see me, truly see me, and acknowledge my worth beyond my wallet. I wanted a moment, just one moment, where they might genuinely appreciate me, not just my contributions. As the day of the anniversary arrived, the air at the Hotel Ritz Paris ballroom crackled with an almost tangible tension. A strange, electric hum that felt like a prelude to a storm I didn't yet foresee. My own meticulously designed gown, a shimmering emerald green silk creation from my latest collection, felt less like a celebration of my craft and more like a costume for a play I hadn't auditioned for, a lavish uniform I wore to fulfill an unspoken role. Every perfectly placed pleat, every delicate hand-stitched detail, seemed to mock the quiet unease churning in my stomach. I moved through the opulent room, a dazzling smile plastered on my face, exchanging polite pleasantries with old money families and prominent fashion critics who recognized my work and my name. My brand was the talk of the town, my designs gracing the covers of prestigious magazines, yet here, amidst my husband's family, I felt perpetually sidelined, an accessory to their grand narrative, a walking, breathing ATM draped in silk. My sister-in-law, Genevieve, flitted about like a brightly colored hummingbird, dressed in an avant-garde ensemble that looked suspiciously expensive, undoubtedly funded by my contributions over the years. She barely acknowledged me beyond a fleeting, self-absorbed nod, her attention entirely consumed by her own self-importance and the flattering comments of a few acquaintances. Pierre, ever the dutiful son, was engrossed in conversation with his parents, their heads bowed in what looked like an intense, hushed discussion near the champagne fountain. A knot tightened in my stomach. The air around them seemed to vibrate with a secret, a conspiracy I was not privy to. Then, my cousin Samantha, a distant relative of Pierre's who occasionally worked as a freelance stylist for fashion editorials and often had her ear to the ground, approached me, her eyes wide with a mixture of concern and something akin to morbid fascination. "Chloe," she whispered, pulling me aside near a towering floral arrangement of white roses and orchids, "I just overheard Henry and Claudette talking. They're planning something about you, and Genevieve." It sounded intense. They kept mentioning your atelier and creative spaces and family legacy in the same breath. "You haven't agreed to anything, have you? Anything big?" A chill snaked down my spine, bypassing the champagne in my hand and settling deep in my bones. The knot in my stomach tightened into a leaden ball. I hadn't agreed to anything. Not yet. But the premonition was undeniable, a cold, hard certainty that whatever was coming, it wasn't good. This wasn't just a party. It was a stage meticulously set, and I was about to be pushed into the spotlight, not for my achievements, but for their agenda. The gilded cage, I realized with a sudden, sickening clarity, was about to snap shut, trapping me within its opulent confines. The moment arrived, seemingly innocuous, yet charged with a palpable tension that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. Henry Dubois, impeccably dressed in a custom tuxedo that bespoke old money and effortless power, tapped his champagne glass with a silver spoon. The murmur of 200 conversations, the polite clinking of cutlery, the soft strains of the string quartet, all hushed, as if on command. A spotlight, previously illuminating a grand ice sculpture, now swiveled to illuminate the family table, casting a harsh glow on my in-laws and, to my dismay, on me. My heart pounded a frantic, uneven rhythm against my ribs. "Ladies and gentlemen," Henry's voice boomed, amplified by the hotel's state-of-the-art sound system, filling every corner of the vast ballroom, "tonight we celebrate 50 years of unwavering love, partnership, and the enduring legacy of the Dubois family. A legacy built on tradition, on shared values, and on boundless generosity." Polite applause rippled through the ballroom, a soft wave of admiration for the venerated couple. Claudette, draped in pearls that seemed to absorb the light, squeezed his arm, her smile fixed and knowing. Then Henry continued, his gaze sweeping the room before settling on me, a predatory glint in his eyes that I had come to recognize all too well over the years, the glint of a predator sizing up its prey. "And tonight," he announced, his voice gaining a theatrical flourish, "we also celebrate the future. The blossoming talent of our dear Genevieve, an artist of profound vision, who, despite her undeniable genius, has faced certain challenges." He paused dramatically, letting the unspoken implication hang in the air, allowing it to resonate with every guest present. Financial challenges, of course. My stomach dropped, plummeting to my feet. I glanced at Pierre, who stood rigidly beside me, looking uncomfortable, nervously fiddling with his cufflink, avoiding my gaze. Genevieve, however, preened under the attention, her eyes alight with anticipation, a self-satisfied smirk playing on her lips. She looked like a cat who had just swallowed a very expensive canary. "It has always been our dream," Claudette interjected, her voice saccharine sweet, devoid of any genuine warmth, "to provide Genevieve with a truly inspiring space, a sanctuary where her creativity can flourish unbounded, free from worldly concerns." Henry then turned directly to me, his smile vanishing, replaced by a mask of cold fury, his eyes piercing mine. "And so, Chloe," he declared, his voice carrying the weight of an imperial decree, "with your incredible business acumen, your thriving atelier, Chloe, and your generous spirit, you have agreed to a wonderful family endeavor. You will be dedicating a significant portion of your beautiful penthouse atelier, that stunning space overlooking the city, so conducive to artistic inspiration, to Genevieve's new permanent studio. A truly selfless gift, a testament to family unity, and a permanent home for her magnificent works." A collective gasp rippled through the room. It wasn't just from me, it was from the guests, a wave of audible shock. My own gasp was trapped in my throat, a suffocating knot of disbelief and rising anger. My atelier? My sanctuary, the heart of my entire business, where my team worked tirelessly, where I poured my soul into every design, where I found my truest self. To Genevieve? The sheer audacity of it left me speechless for a moment. I had not agreed to anything of the sort. This was an ambush, a meticulously orchestrated public shaming designed to corner me, to force my hand, to make me acquiesce under the weight of social pressure. My vision blurred at the edges, a hot flush spreading across my face. My voice, when it finally emerged, was a whisper, though it felt like a roaring defiance in the sudden, palpable silence that had descended upon the ballroom. I haven't agreed to that, Henry, not at all." The words hung in the air, defiant, shocking in their directness. Henry's smile vanished completely, replaced by a mask of cold, unbridled fury. Claudette's hand flew to her chest, her eyes widening with perfectly manufactured shock. "Chloe, darling, what are you saying? This has been discussed at length. For weeks, dear, she insisted, her voice trembling with what sounded like manufactured distress, though I knew it was pure manipulation. Such a gift for family, we spoke of it often. No, Mother Claudette, I corrected, my voice gaining strength with each word, the adrenaline pumping through my veins. It has been assumed. It has been demanded behind my back. It has never been agreed upon by me. Genevieve, sensing her moment slipping away, her artistic dreams of my atelier crumbling before her very eyes, chimed in, her voice shrill with indignation. But Chloe, we talked about it. You said you understood how important a dedicated space was for my art. I've already told so many people how perfect your atelier would be. My gallerist, my collectors, everyone. Her eyes were wide, brimming with genuine tears now, a mix of frustration and indignation. The sheer audacity of their preemptive claim, of having already broadcast their intentions without my consent, of daring to presume ownership of my property, ignited a furious fire within me. Genevieve, I said, my voice cutting through her theatrics, we discussed your need for a studio, yes. I even offered to help you find and fund a suitable space. But my atelier is the core of Atelier Chloe. It is my business, my livelihood, my home away from home. It is not available to be given away as a gift, especially not without my knowledge or consent. Henry's face turned a dangerous shade of crimson, his veins bulging at his temples. He leaned forward, his voice a low, menacing growl, just loud enough for the tables closest to us to hear, ensuring his words carried the full weight of his threat. Chloe, you are embarrassing us, on our special night. This is a family matter, and you are creating a scene. Family supports family, especially when one has been so generously supported by us throughout their career. You have always been difficult, independent, but this is beyond the pale. We have already informed key investors in Genevieve's upcoming, grand project that your atelier would be her creative hub. This is not just about family, it is about our reputation. My gaze darted to Pierre. He stood frozen, utterly paralyzed, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and profound embarrassment, unable to intervene, unable to defend me, caught in the devastating crossfire. The silence in the room was absolute, punctuated only by the occasional nervous cough or the clinking of cutlery from the few guests, still trying to pretend they weren't witnessing a full-blown family drama. My father-in-law then delivered the chilling ultimatum, his voice dropping to a near whisper, yet carrying an undeniable weight of threat, a venomous promise of retribution. Pierre's future, Chloe, he hissed, his eyes narrowed to slits. His inheritance, it is intrinsically tied to family harmony. If you choose to be so uncharitable, so unfamilial, if you choose to defy us publicly on this momentous occasion, there will be consequences. For both of you, serious consequences. The implication was clear, chillingly so. My refusal would not only jeopardize Pierre's standing within the family, but potentially his entire financial future. A future built on the very inheritance Henry controlled. It was a vicious, calculated blow, designed to hit me where I was most vulnerable, my loyalty to my husband, my desire to protect him. The words hung in the air, laced with malice, a bitter poison. My blood ran cold, a wave of nausea washing over me, but simultaneously, a profound, crystal-clear sense of clarity washed over me. This wasn't about love or family. It was about power, control, and endless, insatiable entitlement. They didn't want my help. They wanted my subjugation. I straightened my spine, looked Henry directly in the eyes, and through the haze of shock and betrayal, I found my voice, strong and unwavering, cutting through the silence like a sharp blade. My support, I declared, my voice echoing slightly in the stunned silence, firm and resolute, is not limitless. With those words, a definitive line was drawn. The words stung, not just the implied threat, but the raw, aching realization of how truly transactional, how utterly devoid of genuine affection my relationship with them had become. The aftermath of my declaration was a tableau of stunned silence and thinly veiled chaos. Henry's face, a mask of aristocratic composure moments before, was now contorted with a silent, simmering rage, his eyes burning with an almost animalistic fury. Claudette, ever the dramatist, let out a delicate, theatrical sob, discreetly dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief, drawing sympathetic glances from a few of the older, more impressionable guests. Genevieve looked utterly bewildered, her artistic dreams of occupying my atelier crumbling before her eyes, replaced by a sullen, childish pout. The 200 esteemed guests, previously engaged in polite chatter, were now a frozen audience, their champagne glasses paused midair, their hushed whispers like a rising tide, a collective intake of breath. I stood my ground, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, but a strange, almost serene sense of calm settling over me amidst the storm. The words, "My support is not limitless," felt less like a defiance and more like a declaration of independence, a truth finally uttered after years of silence, a boundary finally drawn in the sand. Pierre, bless his well-meaning but ultimately ineffective nature, finally stirred from his frozen state. He took a hesitant step towards me, his face etched with a familiar mixture of profound embarrassment and overwhelming concern, as if he truly believed the situation could still be salvaged by his intervention. "Chloe, darling, perhaps we can discuss this later in private," he murmured, his voice barely audible, clearly hoping to diffuse the explosive situation with a whisper. But the dam had broken. The carefully constructed facade of family harmony had shattered, exposing the raw, ugly truth beneath, and there was no going back. "There is nothing to discuss, Pierre," I stated, my voice steady, though my hands, hidden in the folds of my gown, were trembling imperceptibly. "My atelier is not for sale, not for donation, and certainly not for seizure. It is the heart of my business, my livelihood, and it remains mine." With that, I turned on my heel, ignoring the lingering stares, the furious whispers that began to erupt like static electricity, and the horrified glances from some of Claudette's closest friends. I walked away from the family table, through the parting sea of onlookers, towards the grand gilded doors of the ballroom exit, the emerald silk of my gown swishing defiantly with each resolute step. Once outside the grand ballroom, the cool, crisp night air of Paris was a welcome balm against the heat of my burning cheeks, a sudden rush of fresh air after the suffocating atmosphere of the conflict. I didn't stop until I reached the valet stand, my mind reeling, a kaleidoscope of anger, disbelief, and a profound, aching betrayal swirling within me. Tears finally pricked at my eyes, hot and stinging. As my car, a sleek silver Tesla, was brought around, a familiar figure approached, moving with a surprising speed. It was Samantha, Pierre's cousin, her face etched with a mixture of concern and a certain grim satisfaction. "Chloe, are you okay?" "Oh my God, I saw everything," she said, her voice soft and genuinely empathetic, immediately grasping the gravity of the situation. "Your father-in-law, he had no right to say those things, to threaten you like that. No one has the right to treat you as a commodity, as a means to an end, family or not." Her words, simple yet profoundly validating, resonated deeply within me, a much-needed confirmation that I wasn't losing my mind. Samantha often worked behind the scenes in Parisian fashion, a sharp observer of both talent and pretension. And crucially, she wasn't blinded by the Dubois' wealth or reputation, seeing them more clearly than even Pierre sometimes could. Once inside my car, safely parked a few blocks away on a quiet side street, I finally allowed the dam to break. Years of suppressed frustration, of feeling unseen and unappreciated, of being used as an endless financial resource, poured out in racking sobs that shook my entire body. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white, tears streaming down my face, blurring the familiar city lights. My phone, still in my purse, began buzzing relentlessly with messages. There were frantic texts from Pierre, desperate, incoherent voicemails from Claudette. Surprisingly, no immediate contact from Henry, which was somehow more chilling than an angry call. But then a text from Genevieve popped up, devoid of any empathy, steeped in self-pity. "You ruined everything, Chloe. My parents are so upset. I can't believe how selfish you are." Her words, once capable of inflicting a dull ache, now barely registered, a pathetic echo of her parents' ingrained entitlement. Samantha, having followed me to ensure I was truly safe and not driving in my distraught state, slid into the passenger seat without a word, immediately enveloping me in a warm, comforting hug. "Everyone is talking about it," she confirmed softly, pulling back slightly to look at me, her eyes filled with genuine concern. "Henry is trying to spin it, of course, claiming you had a nervous breakdown due to the pressures of your business. But most people saw what happened. They saw his true colors. They saw his temper. It was abhorrent." She paused, then added, You know, Chloe, it's not the first time they've tried to strong-arm someone in the family or in their business dealings. They've always seen you as a limitless bank account, never as the brilliant, independent woman you are. Samantha's blunt honesty was a revelation, a powerful beam of light cutting through the fog of my confusion and self-doubt. It was a truth I had subconsciously known, a bitter pill I had refused to fully acknowledge, clinging instead to the increasingly threadbare illusion of acceptance and familial love. Her words began to untangle the knotted mess of guilt, obligation, and emotional manipulation that had bound me for so long. You didn't ruin their anniversary, Chloe, Samantha stated firmly, echoing my own nascent realization, her voice a strong anchor in my storm of emotions. Henry ruined it when he tried to publicly coerce you into giving away your life's work. That's on them, not on you. Their arrogance, their greed, their need for control, that's what shattered their perfect facade, not your defiance. Her perspective was a lifeline, pulling me out of the swirling vortex of self-blame and misplaced guilt. I realized then the painful, undeniable truth. Nothing I ever did, no amount of money I provided, no gesture of goodwill, no personal sacrifice would ever be enough for them. Their entitlement was a black hole, endlessly consuming without ever being filled. And in that moment, sitting in my car on a quiet Parisian street, I knew, with absolute certainty, that I was finally done being consumed. The days following the anniversary were a surreal blur of frantic damage control, but it wasn't coming from my end. It was the Dubois family, scrambling to contain the fallout from Henry's public outburst. My phone was a constant symphony of texts, calls, and increasingly desperate voicemails from Claudette, alternating between tearful pleas for reconciliation and thinly veiled threats about Pierre's family standing, and his professional future if I didn't comply. Henry, true to form, never called me directly. He was too proud, too consumed by his own wounded ego. Instead, he dispatched Pierre as his emissary, burdening my gentle husband with the impossible task of mending a rift his parents had deliberately created, forcing him into an agonizing position between the two people he loved most. Pierre, caught between his formidable parents and his distraught wife, was a nervous wreck, his face pale, his shoulders hunched with the weight of the conflict. "Chloe, please," he pleaded one evening, his voice strained with exhaustion. "Mother says you've isolated yourself. Father is absolutely furious. Can't you just apologize, or perhaps reconsider the atelier, just a small part for the sake of peace? The whispers are everywhere." His words, though well-intentioned and born of his own distress, stung. He still didn't grasp the fundamental breach of trust, the profound public humiliation, the sheer audacity of their demand. He saw it as a temporary misunderstanding, a family squabble that could be smoothed over with a simple apology, not a calculated act of control and avarice. I gently, but firmly, explained to Pierre that an apology from me would be an admission of guilt I did not possess, a tacit acceptance of their unacceptable behavior. "Pierre," I said, looking him directly in the eyes, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. "I was threatened, publicly humiliated, and had my life's work demanded from me as if it were theirs to take. I have nothing to apologize for. If peace is to be had, it must come from their acknowledgement of their actions, not my submission to them. My worth, my home, my business are not bargaining chips for their approval." It was a difficult conversation, one of many over the ensuing weeks. He loved his family fiercely, a loyalty deeply ingrained since childhood, but his devotion was now irrevocably divided, a constant source of quiet pain for both of us. He eventually began to understand, though reluctantly and with immense emotional effort, that my boundaries were not negotiable. He started to understand that their manipulative tactics were not a sign of love, but a tool of control. He acknowledged, for the first time, the immense pressure I had been under for years, the sacrifices I had made, and the immense emotional burden I had carried in trying to appease them. This growing understanding led to a quiet but profound shift in our relationship. Pierre began to prioritize our shared future, our joint well-being, over his parents' relentless demands and expectations. He stopped taking their calls without consulting me, stopped delivering their emotionally charged messages, and began to articulate his own boundaries, albeit gently and tentatively at first, to Henry and Claudette. It was a slow, arduous process, filled with setbacks, moments of despair, and his own quiet battles with guilt, but it was progress. He even found a quiet strength he hadn't known he possessed. He started exploring new professional avenues, independent of his parents' established network and the traditional family businesses, realizing that their control over his career was yet another facet of their manipulative grip. He found a burgeoning interest in sustainable urban development, a field entirely separate from the Dubois family's traditional real estate ventures, and began quietly pursuing certifications and networking on his own terms, without their knowledge. Meanwhile, Atelier Chloe continued its upward trajectory, a beautiful, thriving entity seemingly oblivious to the family drama consuming my personal life. My designs were selling out faster than we could produce them. My collections featured prominently in prestigious fashion weeks from Milan to New York. Yet, a new, subtle layer of complexity emerged within the Parisian social circles that the Dubois family frequented. There were whispers, curious glances, subtle shifts in conversation when I entered a room. The Dubois family, masters of social manipulation, had already begun their carefully constructed smear campaign. Whispers of my cold ambition, my lack of family values, my ungrateful nature, after all they had supposedly done for Pierre. These rumors circulated like an insidious virus, designed to chip away at my reputation, to isolate me socially, to paint me as the villain. But the fashion world, unlike the entrenched Parisian aristocracy, valued talent, innovation, and resilience more than ancestral names or inherited social standing. Many influential figures, having witnessed or heard of the anniversary incident, offered subtle nods of solidarity, a quiet acknowledgement that Henry's tactics were, in fact, an open secret, an unsavory stain on their polished facade. As for Genevieve, her artistic career, supposedly on the cusp of a major breakthrough with my atelier, stalled. Without my financial backing, and with the public attention now focused on the anniversary scandal rather than her art, her grand project never materialized. Her parents, frustrated by my steadfast refusal, channeled their resources back into her, attempting to salvage her image and their own, but their financial well was not as deep as mine, and their patience was far thinner than their initial bluster suggested. The constant drama surrounding Genevieve began to exhaust even their boundless reserves of parental devotion, as her artistic failures became more frequent and expensive. The public cracks in the Golden Empire grew wider. Henry's frustrated outbursts, once confined to private, became more frequent, more public, his temper fraying under the strain of their crumbling social edifice. The meticulously constructed image of the effortlessly elegant and benevolent Dubois family was slowly, imperceptibly, crumbling around them. The karmic threads, however, were more intricately woven than I could have imagined, subtly pulling at the fabric of their carefully constructed reality. My public defiance, while painful, had subtly shifted the narrative. The Dubois family's carefully crafted image of impeccable grace and unwavering family values began to show undeniable cracks. Their golden anniversary, meant to be a crowning achievement, became a whispered tale of their patriarch's shocking public outburst, a cautionary fable shared discreetly over opulent dinner parties. People, particularly in the cutthroat world of Parisian high society, had long suspected a darker undercurrent beneath the Dubois' polished veneer of old-world charm and generosity. My refusal to bend, my simple assertion of self-worth, had inadvertently pulled back the curtain, exposing it for all to see, a stark revelation of their ingrained avarice and controlling nature. The true, veiled revenge or karmic event began to unfold not in my world of fashion, but in their meticulously curated social sphere, in the subtle shifts of alliances, the quiet closing of doors that had once been wide open to them. An invitation to the exclusive Cercle des Étoiles, a prestigious cultural society Henry had long coveted and tirelessly campaigned to join, inexplicably never arrived, despite his connections. A coveted seat on the board of a prominent Parisian art foundation, one Claudette had been actively campaigning for, hoping to secure Genevieve's influence, was quietly awarded to a less influential, but undeniably more discreet, rival. Their long-standing weekend invitations to their sprawling country estate, once a fixture in the social calendar of their peers, dwindled, replaced by vague excuses of prior engagements, or, more tellingly, by complete, deafening silence. It was death by 1,000 paper cuts, a slow, agonizing erosion of the social standing and influence they valued above all else, more than genuine affection, more than family honor. They were never directly confronted, never explicitly told why these doors were closing. It was simply a quiet, collective societal recoil from their public display of avarice and control, a silent condemnation from their peers. This was not something I orchestrated or even influenced directly. It was the natural, inevitable consequence of their own actions, magnified by the spotlight they had chosen to shine on their own avarice at their grand celebration. My defiance had, inadvertently, pulled back the curtain on the Golden Empire, revealing its tarnished, hollow core to those who mattered most to them. The emotional toll of the confrontation and its lingering aftermath was immense. Despite my outward composure and professional success, a deep-seated weariness settled within me, a pervasive exhaustion that no amount of sleep seemed to alleviate. The constant psychological warfare, the subtle social slights aimed at eroding my reputation, and the strained, sorrowful relationship with Pierre began to chip away at my resolve. I knew I couldn't navigate this emotional minefield alone. My dear friend, Isabelle, a renowned psychologist specializing in family systems and intergenerational trauma, had gently suggested therapy for months, recognizing the deep-seated patterns I was trapped in, the emotional enmeshment that suffocated me. It was time. I began weekly sessions with Dr. Sophie Leclerc, a therapist whose empathetic yet incredibly direct approach proved to be precisely what I needed. She possessed a rare ability to cut through the noise, to articulate the unspoken truths, and to challenge my deeply ingrained beliefs about family obligation. In the quiet, tastefully appointed sanctity of her Parisian office, I began the arduous but ultimately liberating process of unraveling decades of conditioning, of trying to earn love through sacrifice, of prioritizing others' expectations and demands over my own well-being and sense of self. Dr. Leclerc helped me understand the insidious nature of the Dubois family's emotional and financial manipulation. They saw me not as a whole, complex person, but as a resource, a bottomless well of funds, a silent enabler of Genevieve's whims, a convenient prop for their social narratives. My steadfast refusal at the anniversary party was not just a rejection of their audacious demand, but a profound disruption to their carefully constructed narrative, where I was cast as the reliable provider, the obedient daughter-in-law. My newfound boundaries, the protective walls I was finally building around my emotional and financial resources, were perceived by them as a heinous betrayal, a direct challenge to their ingrained sense of authority and their perception of themselves as benevolent, generous benefactors. This perspective shift was revolutionary. It removed the crushing burden of misplaced guilt from my shoulders, replacing it with a growing, exhilarating sense of empowerment and self-respect. I wasn't being selfish or ungrateful as they so vehemently claimed. I was finally being true to myself, protecting my energy, my hard-earned assets, and my fundamental peace of mind. The therapy extended beyond just my relationship with my in-laws. It forced me to examine the intricate and often painful dynamics within my marriage. Pierre, a man I loved deeply, was still, to a significant extent, entangled in the invisible web of filial duty and a desperate, lifelong yearning for his parents' approval. He struggled visibly to reconcile their publicly abhorrent behavior with the private devotion he felt for them, a conflict that tore him apart. Dr. Leclerc encouraged us to attend a few joint sessions together, and gradually, painstakingly, Pierre began to see his parents' actions through a clearer, less idealized lens. He started to understand that their threats regarding his inheritance were not a sign of love or concern for his future, but a crude and powerful tool of control, a manipulative lever designed to ensure his obedience. He acknowledged, for the first time, the immense pressure I had been under for years, the profound sacrifices I had made, and the crushing emotional burden I had carried in trying to appease their insatiable demands. There were tears, apologies, and a raw honesty that, though painful, ultimately deepened our bond. This growing understanding led to a quiet but profound shift in our relationship. Pierre began to prioritize our shared future, our joint well-being, our mutual happiness, over his parents' relentless demands and manipulative tactics. He stopped taking their calls without consulting me, stopped delivering their emotionally charged, often accusatory messages, and began to articulate his own boundaries, albeit gently and tentatively at first, to Henry and Claudette. It was a slow, arduous process for him, filled with setbacks, moments of despair, and his own quiet battles with ingrained guilt, but it was undeniable progress. He even found a quiet strength he hadn't known he possessed, a steel spine that slowly began to emerge from years of bending. He started exploring new professional avenues, entirely independent of his parents' established network and the traditional family businesses, realizing that their control over his career was yet another facet of their manipulative grip. He found a burgeoning, genuine interest in sustainable urban development, a field entirely separate from the Dubois family's traditional real estate ventures, and began quietly pursuing certifications and networking on his own terms, without their knowledge or approval. He was, finally, finding his own identity, his own purpose. My relationship with Genevieve, though never close, had reached an all-time low. She remained convinced I had personally sabotaged her artistic dreams, a convenient scapegoat for her lack of sustained effort, discipline, and original vision. I made no further offers of financial support, having learned my lesson the hardest way possible. Her parents, in turn, funneled more money into her, attempting to salvage her image and their own, but their financial well was not as deep as mine, and their patience was far thinner than their initial bluster suggested. The constant drama surrounding Genevieve and her perpetually failing projects began to exhaust even their boundless reserves of parental devotion. As her artistic failures became more frequent, more public, and far more expensive, the veneer of the Golden Empire began to crack in public, too, not just in social circles, but in the family itself. The subtle social slights from their peers intensified. Invitations to exclusive events, once guaranteed, became scarce. Henry's frustrated outbursts, once confined to private, became more frequent, more public, his temper fraying under the strain of their crumbling social edifice, further alienating those around them. The meticulously constructed image of the effortlessly elegant and benevolent Dubois family was slowly, imperceptibly, crumbling around them, a direct karmic consequence of their own arrogance and public display of entitlement. My defiance at the anniversary party, once seen as a scandalous rupture, was now, for many discerning members of Parisian high society, viewed as an act of courageous truth-telling, a necessary dismantling of a long-standing illusion. As weeks bled into months, the ripples from the anniversary party grew into a quiet but undeniable tide that began to erode the very foundations of the Dubois family's once unassailable social standing. This wasn't a direct assault on my part. It was a testament to the fact that power, especially in the rarefied, intricate world of Parisian high society, relies heavily on perception, on an unblemished reputation, and on maintaining a meticulous facade. Henry and Claudette had always been utterly meticulous about presenting an image of impeccable grace, boundless generosity, and unwavering family unity. My public defiance, my simple assertion of my support is not limitless, had shattered that illusion into 1,000 glittering pieces for all to see. The whispers, initially confined to immediate circles, had spread like wildfire, amplified by the natural curiosity, and often the veiled schadenfreude of the elite who reveled in the downfall of their rivals. Their golden anniversary, meant to be a crowning jewel in their illustrious social calendar, had instead become an infamous turning point, a whispered tale of their patriarch's shocking public outburst, a symbol of their true, grasping nature. The revenge, if one could call it that, was entirely karmic and beautifully indirect, unfolding with a chilling elegance. It manifested not in grand, public confrontations, not in legal battles or shouted accusations, but in subtle, almost imperceptible shifts in social dynamics that, for the Dubois, were more devastating than any financial loss. An invitation to the exclusive Cercle des Étoiles, a prestigious cultural society Henry had long coveted and tirelessly campaigned to join, mysteriously never arrived, despite his extensive connections. His inquiries were met with vague, bureaucratic responses. A coveted seat on the board of a prominent Parisian art foundation, one Claudette had been actively campaigning for, hoping to secure Genevieve's influence and bolster her artistic standing, was quietly awarded to a less influential, but undeniably more discreet, rival whose family had no public scandals. Their long-standing weekend invitations to their sprawling country estate, once a highly anticipated fixture in the social calendar of their peers, dwindled, replaced by vague excuses of prior engagements, or, more tellingly, by complete, deafening silence from once loyal friends. It was the social equivalent of a slow, elegant bleed, imperceptible to outsiders, but agonizingly real to those like the Dubois, whose entire identity was built on their meticulously curated social standing. They were slowly, painstakingly, being exiled from the very circles they cherished. I, meanwhile, focused on my work and my own blossoming sense of peace. Atelier Chloe thrived, unburdened by the constant financial demands and emotional drains. My designs, perhaps infused with a newfound sense of liberation and creative freedom, seemed to resonate even more deeply with my clients, selling out faster than ever before. My success became a silent, eloquent rebuttal to their accusations of cold ambition. I was ambitious, yes, but my ambition was fueled by passion, by artistic integrity, not by greed or entitlement. I was building a legacy of true creativity, not one built on others' wealth. Pierre, too, was quietly flourishing, shedding the skin of the dutiful son. He had fully embraced his interest in sustainable urban development with a quiet fervor, attending industry conferences, networking with like-minded professionals, and even taking evening courses at the Sorbonne. He secured a prestigious position with an international firm known for its innovative eco-friendly projects, a role entirely earned through his own merit and hard work, far removed from his family's influence or expectations. He had found a new sense of purpose, a path that was truly his own, free from the ancestral expectations of the Dubois family. He even began to shed some of his ingrained deference to his parents, speaking to them with a newfound assertiveness, particularly when they attempted to discuss family matters involving my finances or Genevieve's perpetually struggling art career. He was, for the first time, an independent man. Genevieve, without my open purse strings and with her parents' resources now stretched thin by their own social struggles, found her grand projects increasingly difficult to launch. Her exhibitions became smaller, less ambitious, her sales negligible. She was forced to take on commercial commissions, painting portraits and murals for local businesses, a far cry from the grand, visionary exhibitions her parents had always envisioned for her. Her parents, having exhausted their own resources and finding no further leverage with me, had scaled back their financial support significantly. The constant tension over money, over her mounting debts and lack of artistic breakthrough, had, ironically, fostered a more realistic understanding of her true financial situation, even if it came with lingering resentment towards me. I heard, through Samantha and other oblique sources, that Genevieve was becoming increasingly frustrated with her parents, accusing them of not providing enough support, echoing their own historical complaints about my lack of generosity. The insidious cycle of entitlement, once directed solely at me, was now turning inward, consuming them from within, fracturing their own internal harmony. The slow, quiet erosion of the Dubois family's social standing was not my doing, nor was it my intent. It was simply the inevitable consequence of their own actions. Their arrogance, their blatant display of entitlement, their public mistreatment of me, all of these had shattered the fragile illusion of their perfect family. The Parisian elite, while often complicit in their own social games and power plays, also held a deep-seated value for discretion, for maintaining appearances, and for a certain level of decorum. Henry's public outburst, his thinly veiled threats, and Claudette's dramatic theatrics had violated these unspoken rules of their world. The Golden Empire was not crumbling with a bang, but with a series of quiet, elegant retreats, unanswered invitations, overlooked nominations, and a growing sense of social irrelevance that was far more painful to them than any direct confrontation could have been. And for me, this unfolding realization was a profound lesson in the power of boundaries, and the often unseen, deeply satisfying justice that life can deliver when you finally choose yourself. 6 months after the anniversary debacle, my life had settled into a new, profoundly healthier rhythm, a serene counterpoint to the distant echoes of Dubois family discord. My relationship with my parents-in-law remained distant, punctuated only by formal holiday greetings exchanged through Pierre, and an occasional, carefully worded email from Claudette that still, inevitably, hinted at Genevieve's struggles or the fleeting hope of a family reconciliation. But the emotional grip they once held, that insidious, suffocating pull, was gone. My boundaries, once terrifying to establish and fraught with internal conflict, were now my unshakable fortress. A clear delineation of self-worth and non-negotiable respect. I no longer sought their approval, no longer felt the phantom tug of obligation or the gnawing guilt that had plagued me for years. The liberation was exhilarating, like shedding a heavy, invisible cloak I had worn for decades, finally able to breathe freely, to move without constraint. My therapy sessions with Dr. Leclerc had transformed me, not just helping me to heal from past hurts, but enabling me to build a robust sense of self-worth that was entirely independent of external validation or familial expectations. I was whole, complete on my own terms. Pierre and I had also found our footing on firmer ground. The initial strain in our marriage, born from his excruciatingly conflicted loyalties, had given way to a deeper, more authentic connection. He had continued his pursuit of sustainable urban development with quiet determination. And just last month, he secured a prestigious position with an international firm known for its innovative eco-friendly projects, a role that truly excited him. It was a career milestone entirely earned through his own merit, his own hard work, far removed from his family's influence or the traditional pathways they had mapped out for him. The pride I felt for him was immense, a silent, joyful testament to his quiet courage in forging his own path, in stepping out of his parents' shadow. He no longer sought his parents' blessing for his career choices. He sought my understanding, our shared vision, our mutual support. Our home, my Atelier penthouse, once a symbol of my hard-won independence, now felt like a shared sanctuary, a true partnership, a solid foundation for our joint future, built on trust and mutual respect. As for Genevieve, her artistic career, perpetually on the brink of breakthrough, finally seemed to settle into a modest reality. The grand dreams her parents had for her, fueled by my previously endless generosity, had dissipated. She was forced to take on commercial commissions more frequently now, painting portraits for private clients and murals for local businesses. A far cry from the grand, visionary exhibitions her parents had once envisioned for her. Her parents, having exhausted their own resources and finding no further leverage with me, had scaled back their financial support significantly. The constant tension over money, over her mounting debts and persistent lack of artistic breakthrough, had, ironically, fostered a more realistic understanding of her true financial situation, even if it came with lingering resentment towards me and increasingly towards her own parents. I heard, through Samantha and other oblique sources, that Henry and Claudette were becoming increasingly consumed by their declining social standing. The subtle snubs had become more pronounced. Their once packed social calendar now had noticeable gaps, their invitations fewer, their influence diminished. Their frustration simmered, often boiling over into public arguments, a stark contrast to their carefully cultivated image, further eroding their standing. My relationship with Samantha, Pierre's cousin, had deepened into a genuine friendship. She was a constant source of wry observations, empathetic support, and insider information that often made us both shake our heads in disbelief. We often shared a laugh over the latest social maneuverings of the Dubois family, noting how their desperate attempts to reclaim their former glory only seemed to push them further into social obscurity. She understood, intuitively, the complex dance of family dynamics and the silent battles fought beneath polite smiles. The true revenge was simply living my best life, thriving, and watching the architects of my past pain slowly, elegantly, dismantle their own gilded cage with their own hands. Standing on the terrace of my atelier, overlooking the twinkling lights of Paris as the setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and violet, I often reflected on the journey. The pain of the anniversary party, the sting of Henry's public words, the blatant disregard for my hard work and my boundaries, it had all been a crucible. It had forged a stronger, more resilient version of myself. I had learned that true strength lies not in endless sacrifice for others, but in setting clear, unwavering boundaries, in safeguarding my own well-being. I learned that love should elevate, not diminish or control. I learned that authentic connection thrives on mutual respect and genuine appreciation, not on financial dependency or manipulative tactics. And perhaps most importantly, I learned that my worth was inherent, an immutable truth, not contingent on my ability to fulfill someone else's expectations or to be their bottomless well of resources. Henry's threat had been a painful ending to one chapter of my life, a harsh closing of a door to a past I no longer desired. But it had also been the catalyst for something entirely new, something infinitely more authentic, a legacy built not on inherited wealth or social status, but on integrity, self-respect, unwavering determination, and the quiet triumph of my own spirit. Have you ever experienced a similar situation, a moment where you had to draw a line in the sand with family and felt those same complex emotions? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story touched something in you, make sure to subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear that sometimes the most courageous act is to say no. And that your support, your time, and your energy are not limitless. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that true family supports your growth rather than stunting it for their convenience.